Happy New Year and welcome to the TBN Israel podcast. Mati, I want to wish you
Shana Tova, Yair.
Shana Tova and
Happy
an
New
amazing
Year.
2025.
So the backstory behind this is we've been challenging Micah on our team to have an ever-increasing cup because it bothers our producer. And he's so far risen to the challenge every week on week.
Definitely. But now we have to put it aside because it takes, I think, half of the
It blocks
frame.
our shots.
So it's got to be here. But good job, Micah.
So Yair, we're talking about something a little different today.
I think it's going to be very interesting.
Not just one topic.
Yeah.
Since we've transitioned from 2024 to 2025, we want to talk about who are the top tier enemies of the state of Israel.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to summarize who are the enemies that did the most damage, physical, emotional, economically, the amount of frequency of the attacks, rockets, propaganda, and cyber warfare, the remaining capabilities to attack Israel again, like potential threats for 2025. These are the criterias that we're going to rank our enemies.
And the reason we're doing this is because everything's changed.
Definitely.
This is what's important. Is that what we would have ranked a year ago is completely different than what we would have ranked now. What we would have rated 18 months ago would have been a completely different map. So we want to help everyone frame the conversation of what has happened and who's standing and what their potential damage to the state of Israel can be in the year to come.
But
2025.
before we're going to start, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tomer. But before we're going to start, please click that subscribe button so that you'll never miss an episode of Boots on the Ground, TBN Israel, the podcast, In Our Neighborhood, or My State. These are the programs that we have now. Stay tuned to what's happening in Israel and pray for the situation.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and then just to give people the trigger to also subscribe, we have a website. And on that website, you'll see the articles come up on a daily basis. The link is below. It's the tbnisrael.com. tbnisrael.com is our website. And just to give you a glimpse of what's happening this coming week on the YouTube channel, to encourage you to subscribe, we have an exclusive. Yair and I visited Manara, which is one of the communities worst damaged and hurt.
It's the closest Israeli community to Lebanon. It's right on the border.
It's a beautiful, touching episode. I must tell you, I watched it last night and I couldn't hold my tears, even that
So it was a very touching and moving experience for us visiting the place. Then we have an interview airing over the weekend where I interview Sapir Cohen, who is one of the most encouraging and unique of the hostages that's been released.
She's a hostage that was released in the first phase of hostage exchanges, not hostage exchange, but prisoner exchange with Hamas. It was, I think, over a year ago.
Yeah, and I was in tears interviewing her. She was a touching and deeply impressive individual. That's also airing on the weekend. And then countless other pieces, including daily news updates.
By the way, about the hostage episode, we couldn't cut even a minute out of that. So we're going to put the full interview.
You're talking about what? Sapir's
the full
interview. It's going to be the full episode with a full interview. It was a beautiful piece.
Yeah. So back to today's topic.
Yeah.
So when we have regular content that's being released on the website and on the YouTube channel, so we're encouraging everyone like, share, subscribe, the usual stuff.
Help us a lot.
Let's zoom back into the topic. Our topic today is who are our enemies and what's their ranking.
Yeah.
And we'll start from the top. And the top is, if you want to give a drum roll,
the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Exactly. And the Islamic Republic of Iran. And we say this because over the past year, we're trying to differentiate in the way people perceive who the Iranians are.
Yeah.
The Iranian people don't necessarily, or are not,
majority of them don't hate us.
The Iranian people are by definition not necessarily represented by the Iranian government.
For sure.
And you'll hear this from the Iranian people, you hear this from experts on Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps or the Iranian Islamic government doesn't represent the will and the desires of the Iranian people. So when we're talking about Iran, what we mean is the agenda, the actions of the Iranian government. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And we're talking about their leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and his threats, nuclear threats against this region, against Israel, and
against
their
Trump
role
yesterday.
in funding and supplying weapons to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to the Houthis, to Iranian militias in Iraq and also in Syria, and up until a few weeks ago. And they are still number one of the options that we have, the contenders for being Israel's most dangerous enemies. Okay,
So
second.
let's step back. So let's talk about who Iran really is.
You don't want to like list them and then go one
Oh,
by
you want
one?
to go all the enemies? Fine.
Let's list them and then go all
if we
them.
must.
Okay, number 2.
Our good friends, the Hezbollah. Oh, I should say they were our good friends, the Hezbollah.
Yes.
They're no longer with us in the way they were before.
For sure.
What's left of them is, if we were comparing this to the automotive industry, they are a pile of car wrecks,
Yeah.
not a car lot.
Pieces that still trying to assemble themselves together.
Hezbollah were the big enemy and big threat up north, and they're no longer the big enemy.
Yeah.
They're no longer really up north, and they're no longer really existent. So that's number 2 on our list.
Yeah. Number 3.
The
Houthis. The flip-flop wearing Houthis from Yemen.
Wait, I have a joke. This is Alon's joke. What is a Mexican man who wears sandals? What is his name? Felipe Felope.
Very good, Mati. Very good, Mati.
Alon's joke.
I want to apologize on behalf
Don't
of
apologize
the
on my
dad
behalf.
jokes of Mati.
I stand behind my joke 100%. It was Alon's joke. I've been laughing about it for 3 days. Anyway, so the Houthis out of Yemen, they're so weird and so niche of an enemy that the other day when there was yet again one of those rocket attacks, I had to sit my kids down because they were really confused about who was firing rockets at us.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to explain.
And they said it's coming because it was the day before it was Hamas, then the day after there was the Houthis again,
yeah.
And then so they said something about this is the Hezbollah. And I said no, it's not Hezbollah. So who is it? Hamas?
Yeah.
No, Houthis. Where are the Houthis? So I had to open up a map and try to explain who the Houthis are, why they don't control Yemen. We'll get to it. It's complicated. Wait, there's more.
We have now the Palestinian terrorism.
Yes.
Which is a big sector because there's multiple Palestinian terrorist groups that operate in the Israeli area.
First and foremost on that list were, of course, Hamas. Hamas, which is, again, we'll break that down. They've been dramatically diminished as a fighting force.
Yeah.
Dramatically. And then underneath them, you have Islamic Jihad. You have a ton of, let's call it local militias that are fighting us. It's not in any list. The common denominator behind all of these people is one way or another, they're weaponized, they're trained, they're funded by our good friends, the Iranian government.
Yeah, this is the common denominator for all of these
of them,
groups, basically. Yes, but we'll see who is also, responsible and which group is and did the most damage to Israel in the past year. So
we'll add one thing is, and we were talking about this before we started rolling, is what we don't know is what we really don't know. And I'll explain that statement.
Definitely, I agree 100%. I don't know what I don't know, for sure.
In your case, I'm just kidding. When we're looking into 2025, we know about these enemies, and all of them seem like they're weakened. All of them seem like they're mostly controlled, and the risk is mitigated. But the way we've learned in the last year is that you definitely don't know what can come.
Yeah.
And the number of players that have been moving and the pieces moving on the table is just changing on almost a daily or weekly basis. And if you look at Syria, for example, Syria was an enemy state to Israel, led by a dictator for over 50 years. And in a matter of weeks, 10 days, the government is overthrown, the dictator flees the country, and the entire country is taken over by HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, a terrorist organization previously affiliated with Al-Qaeda, led by al-Julani, or that was his previous name.
What's his name now?
He changed it twice in the last week. I can't keep track anymore.
Now he's wearing suits, by the way.
Yeah,
looking
we'll
sharp.
He left the Zelensky look.
We'll stick with Al-Julani till he changes it in his social security card.
Now he looks like Assad with a beard.
He's been rebranding on a weekly basis, Al-Julani. He takes over the country, so things have been moving here so rapidly, and we'll get to this at the end, to the, let's call this speculation and conspiracy part, because we really don't know who is going to be the big enemy next year. What we do know...
It can be even a surprise, like the Houthis, came from nowhere, so we can have kind of a same situation.
We'll get to that. So let's start with Iran.
Well, before that, I want to add another contender to the list, Mati, and that's all the anti-Israel and I like to say pro-terrorist protests around the world. And I think this is a major contender in this contest, because it's ideologically and it's anti-Semitic trends that are moving, and they're moving in the best universities in the world. And it's something that we should address because it will affect every society, even in the West.
Yeah. So a trend that we follow here, and
Yeah.
a common thread in everything we talk about, is the fact that this war is not just a war that is explained by politics or geopolitics or diplomacy. It's both spiritual and it's narrative based.
Yeah.
And a big element in everything that we've been fighting for the last year is the fact that the hatred of Israel and the anti-Semitic rhetoric and emotion that comes out of that mindset it's diabolical. It comes from a dark and evil place, whatever you believe in, by the way.
Definitely.
It can't be explained by rationale. There is no logic in the level of hatred, and the actions taken by those who hate Israel in a disproportionate way dramatically affect the way the world talks about this. You see it in CNN, you see it in BBC, you see it in the UN in the UN Security Council and the General Assembly, you see it in the UN agencies that deal with it, you see it in campuses across the world. A disproportionate hatred of the people of Israel.
Definitely. You see it at the United Nations resolutions
Yeah.
against Israel compared to all the countries that are funding terrorism in this world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's completely, weird. It doesn't make any sense. The only thing I can make sense of it is that this is a spiritual war.
Both.
Which actually encourages me personally, to know that it aligns with the Bible prophecies and with the fact that the enemy wants to destroy Israel because Israel is a symbol of God's faithfulness.
Yeah, we'll break this down more in depth.
Yeah. But these are the contenders that we have.
These are the main players. And then we're also going to address the question of the hostages. Because we can't talk about 2024, we can't talk about 2025 without addressing the 100 hostages that remain alive and some of them dead in Hamas captivity within the Gaza Strip. They're very important. They're close to the hearts of us, our team, and everyone in Israel. So we're gonna talk about that. That's, by the way, that's something we've taken as a team as a goal for this year, is to really maintain the story of the hostages at the forefront of everyone's minds and hearts, because this isn't just a war about like what army is doing this and what army is doing that.
No.
We have our children, our wives, our husbands, our
grandparents
who were murdered, kidnapped, and held hostage for now over, 470?
400 and I think it's like 60 now, 460.
Anyways,
58, 60.
Can I
It's over
ask you
40
something,
months.
Mati?
Yeah.
After the meeting, something changed in what you feel about
Before the meeting.
before the meeting?
Before we've talked about this maybe a couple months ago. I spent an entire weekend. I was reading some of like the stories of the hostages that came out, and it was just sitting heavy on my heart, very heavy. The fact that we need to do more as a team to make sure people know about what's happening with the hostages.
Yeah.
And I felt condemned, even personally, guilty for the fact that I was going on with life as if it was business as usual, while my brothers and sisters are remaining in
a tunnel somewhere.
in a tunnel, rotting away somewhere in Hamas.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to go into Israeli domestic politics because it gets very complicated when you do that. I'll just say that it is crucial for every Israeli, every non-Israeli, every person with a conscience around the world to say that, look, like forget the geopolitics, forget the war, forget the big picture. At the end, there are 100 people that are rotting away in tunnels, in caves, in basements, receiving terrible, terrible treatment by Hamas. They're not combatants, they're not soldiers, they were people kidnapped simply for the sake of being Israelis. I don't say Jews, by the way, because also non-Jews were kidnapped.
Yeah,
Bedouins, Muslims, they were kidnapped too by Hamas terrorists. Many of them,
U.S. nationals
Yeah.
and other, international community people were kidnapped.
yeah, and Tomo, thank you for derailing my thought process.
No,
Yeah,
I
but-
think
but-
it's
yeah, but
important.
I want to
You
say-
had a first-hand meeting with
Yeah, we
Sapir.
spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We actually knew Hirsch Goldberg's parents before the war started. You knew Hirsch
Yeah, I
personally.
know.
I worked with his father on a project where we several times met here in this very building before the war started. So this is not, again, Israel's a tiny country. We all know these people. For us,
Hersh, by the way, was one of the,
One of the six.
more known hostages. He's from Jerusalem. He's dual Israel and U.S. national. His parents went to the United States, spoke with President Biden multiple times.
He's a real
And he was
Jerusalemite.
murdered by Hamas
Yeah.
just a few hours before the IDF was able to enter the tunnel that he was held in, the Gaza Strip, just to give a background story. of this.
I still remember what I felt that day.
Yeah.
Can't
I think
forget it.
every person in this country, was choking back tears the day we heard the hostages were killed.
Yeah.
Because again, there were too many hostages to remember all the faces, although we should remember all the faces. But there were a handful where the parents just went above and beyond and their ability to muster international support. And Hirsch was one of them. There were several others in that case.
Yeah.
And then, Tomo, to your point, we talked to Sapir Cohen a week and a half ago. A week and a half ago, spent a good couple hours with her. One, I was just like looking at some of her past reports and testimonies before I met with her. I was crying, like I couldn't stop crying that morning. And then meeting with her in person, to feel the hardship and the pain that people experience in captivity, and the injustice. Again, there's things we assume when we go into war. Innocent people are going to be hurt. There's just no way around it. We try to minimize it. It still happens. Combatants are going to be killed. But these are people who did nothing. These are people who were visiting their grandparents and were kidnapped out of their beds, at 6 a.m. by terrorists and dragged into Gaza, threatened with rape, threatened with violence, starved, beaten. It's just horrific. Anyway, all that to say is this is a topic that will remain in our minds, on our hearts.
Definitely. And since you had that, urge to do more for the hostages, every Boots on the Ground report ends with a personal story about one hostage to make it personal. When you pray, you can pray for that hostage personally. Okay, so let's go on.
Iran?
Yeah, Iran. Okay, number 1 in the list, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Let's do it step by step. Okay, damage caused to Israel. So physical, emotional, and economic. What did they do to us?
So Iran have been the big bad guy for a very long time. They've been pushing for a nuclear program, not for peaceful reasons. Let's be honest.
Definitely not. Yeah, because they've been, at the same time developing their rocket launching capabilities, specifically the rockets that can carry a nuclear payload.
Yeah, and we often, and I was thinking about this in the last couple of weeks, we often quote the numbers of what they funded Hezbollah with. So they're the ones behind Hamas, they're the ones behind Hezbollah, they're the ones behind the Houthis and countless other terrorist attacks. And we always throw that big number. It's $1 billion a year for Hezbollah. Yeah. But they spend on the IRGC. They spend. People need to understand this. They spend the GDP of like many countries' budget. They spend tens of billions of dollars a year on the IRGC alone.
Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps.
Yes, and so the IRGC is a para-governmental, paramilitary organization whose sole task is to destabilize and export terrorism.
Yeah, and export the Islamic Revolution of Iran
to the rest
of the world by funding terrorist groups with ideology, with weapons, with training, and with money.
Yeah, and when you look at the fingerprints of the Iranian government, aside from what they do within Iran, and we'll get to that in a second, they're behind Hamas. They trained Hamas terrorists, the Nukhba terrorists, which are the Hamas elite forces that flooded across the border into Israel to murder, maim, and kidnap Israelis on the morning of October 7th, 2023. Many of them were physically trained within Iran. Yeah. This needs to be understood because people forget this. Definitely. They traveled through Sinai because we allowed them, as in the Hamas and the Egyptians, to control the Philadelphia corridor. Just remember that in the back of your head. Yeah. They traveled out of the Gaza Strip and out into Iran. Some of them in Syria were trained, some of them in Lebanon. Many of them trained in Iran, in explosives, in
urban
QCB,
warfare,
in close quarters combat, in many, many different things.
Rocket launching capabilities, manufacturing rockets.
Yeah, manufacturing drones. Yeah. So again, they're physically exporting terrorism to every corner of anyone who's willing to cooperate with them, I guess. Yeah. It's not limited to the Arab world. And they've done this at a cost that is tens of billions of dollars per year. Yeah. And not only that, they've manufactured mechanisms, the Houthis are an example of that, of disrupting world trade. Yeah. So when you think of what does the IRGC Navy look like? It's speedboats, it's not ships. Why is it speedboats? Because they want to use piracy methodology against trade going through the Bab el-Mandab Straits or the Hormuz Straits.
Yeah, it's a small boat that doesn't cost a lot, with easy to train people, and then causes a lot of damage to big boats that are basically merchant ships. Yeah, there's no way of defending themselves.
So first and foremost, the Iranians, what they are an exporter of terrorism and violence, and that's what they've done, and they've done it systematically. We've talked about this many times. They've done this at the expense of the Iranian people.
Always, it's always the case. Yeah,
and they're hurting the Iranian people. They're taking away the money from the Iranian people. They're using extreme violence, and we've interviewed several experts on Iran recently, and we're going to have more content on this topic coming, talking about the fact that the Iranian people suffer dramatically because of the violence of their regime. So first and foremost, and this is the theme with every one of these organizations, they suffer first. Before they reach Israel, before they disrupt shipping trades, shipping routes and all that stuff, The people who suffer are the people of those countries on every level.
Yeah.
Then the Iranians, so they've attacked us through Hezbollah, they've attacked us through Hamas, through the Houthis, but they've also, for the first time ever, attacked us directly this year.
Yeah, a few times.
Yeah.
A few times directly with rockets, with drones, and with cruise missiles.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah, from Iran.
Yeah.
And propaganda, they are also invested a lot in propaganda against Israel, in Western countries and other places. And cyber warfare also. We had some cyber attacks that were affiliated to Iran. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tomer?
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't really, disrupt our lives here, but it
I
affected.
put you down in green.
Yeah.
What the exact ones?
So the Iranians, if we look at their overall effect and their overall power in this region, they've gone, let's say they were at an 8 or a 9 at the beginning of the October 7th offensive on their end. I would place them somewhere in like a 2.5 or 3 right now. They've lost the majority of the assets that were holding. They had a doctrine called the Ring of Fire, where they would try to surround Israel, so they would have, what's the term? There's a term from the Cold War that's called mutual guaranteed annihilation or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I forget what it is exactly in English, where essentially it says it's like, whatever you do to me,
I'll do to you.
I'll do to you 10 times over. So sort of we were assured.
Basically, if you attack me, both of us are dead.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
So the Iranians placed all these pawns around us: the Hezbollah, the Hamas, the Syrians, all these different militias, and even within Israel, with the purpose of preventing Israel or dissuading Israel from going after them, for fear of retaliation through proxies. And this year, they've lost a dramatic number of those proxies, and the list is long.
Yeah.
I mean, they've lost their investment in Hamas, excuse me, their investment in Hezbollah, their powers that be in Syria, a lot of the other assets that they had in the region, and even their assets within Houtistan, which isn't the name of a place.
Houtistan.
Within Houthi-controlled
the Houthi land.
Houthi land in Yemen. That isn't really a term.
Yeah,
just look that up.
but they still have an arsenal of ballistic missiles that is considered the biggest in the Middle East, in this region, basically.
Excuse me.
And they are still capable of carrying out cyber attacks. And of course, I think the number one potential threat against Israel for 2025 is their nuclear capabilities.
Yeah,
Okay, the
so
military nuclear capabilities that are still developing, and the West and Israel will need to address this threat in this year.
I'm a little murky on my timeline. I believe the JCPOA expires sometime now. Let's say in the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
The JCPOA is there's a nuclear proliferation treaty or anti-nuclear proliferation treaty, which there's an international committee. It's a very long story that's 15 years long.
Yeah.
Where the international community had a deal with the Iranians, preventing them from becoming a nuclear threshold country with military capabilities. And during the previous Trump administration, the U.S. government withdrew unilaterally from that agreement.
Yeah.
And the Iranians said, no problem, guys. We're continuing to push on for nuclear capabilities.
Yeah, basically.
And in that process, Israel didn't strike any of their nuclear facilities except for one. Do you know the story about this?
No.
So what was it? Last month, we struck deep into Iran.
Yes.
And everyone knows about what we officially did. We officially knocked out a bunch of surface-to-air batteries.
Yeah, the S-300
systems.
One secret facility.
anti-aircraft defense systems.
So the list was
Yeah.
3 S-300 batteries, and a bunch of other strategic facilities related to the IRGC.
Yeah.
And one more secret facility. And this is where it's a little complicated. I'll try to explain. When you have nuclear supervisors, they're supposed to know about all your facilities.
Yeah.
So there's a list of the official nuclear facilities within Iran. And those facilities, still to this day, are frequented by international supervisors. But they also have unofficial nuclear facilities.
Definitely. Well, they develop whatever they want because they don't let the supervisor, the nuclear watchdog agents enter these
Well, they officially don't
facilities.
exist. So
Yes.
officially they
Some
don't
of them,
exist.
they just say you're not allowed in them.
They officially don't exist. And Israel...
This is a
Israel,
flower
okay.
producing company. We're
Very,
making
very
flour
simple.
here. We don't make it.
So they don't exist, and Israel didn't bomb them. It's
Yeah.
a perfect equation.
Yeah, that's good.
So we know this now because it's been leaked to international sources, such as ourselves, I guess. We're also an international source. That the Israeli Air Force did bomb one of their facilities. Well, there are many more.
Yeah.
And it is a threat. Israel or Israeli experts, and we've interviewed quite a few of them, they say Iran is what we call a nuclear threshold country. And what that means is
They're
I'll
about
explain
to
to
reach a nuclear bomb.
I just want to say that we just kidnapped some of the best scientists from Syria in a commando.
Commander raid, yeah, a few months ago. But that we don't know if they're nuclear scientists or chemical scientists or whatever scientists they are. So, okay, so Iran, you put them at 2.5 out of 10.
Look, they're the biggest threat from Israel's perspective.
Yeah, the biggest. I think they're the only existential threat from Israel's perspective.
As of now, yes.
As of now,
yeah,
yes.
I agree with that. They've been very, very weakened, but that doesn't mean they don't have power.
Definitely.
Which is, I guess, it's a little complicated to understand. They've lost many of their muscles, like their ability to exact damage on Israel and take a price from us is lower, but they still have power.
Definitely, they are a huge country with big influence, big money, and also ideological influence around the world.
Look, remember the beginning of the war. These are so. The Iranians have these levers of power. They have mechanisms where they're able to push a button, so to speak, and disrupt something.
Hezbollah is attacking.
Exactly.
Hezbollah is trying to kidnap a soldier or a civilian.
Yeah, so a lot of those buttons are no longer on the table. Hezbollah is on the table, Hamas isn't, Syria militias are off the table.
Assad is off the table.
Yeah, but the Houthis are still on the, they're still available.
Houthis are still,
They have still the ability to launch missiles. They still have the ability to disrupt global trade. And remember the beginning of, what was it, the first 2.5 months of the war, something like that? The Houthis were disrupting trade through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, which is the entry into the Red Sea, and the Iranians, through Houthis and through whatever, their IRGC forces, they never officially took responsibility for it, were still attacking vessels within the Arabian Sea. So the Arabian Sea is the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, so Saudi and Yemen, and that was IRGC forces. Just 2 days ago, I'm trying to think what the timeline was. 2 or 3 days ago, one of the two.
One of the days.
One of those days, the Houthis and the Iranian government, through the IRGC, they sent a drone and missile attack to an American aircraft carrier. You know this? Yeah. People talk about this as if we're in a peaceful state. They attacked the American.
They don't care.
Is it Navy. The Navy or Marines? I'm not sure which one of them it is. But anyway, one of them.
An American vessel.
An American vessel.
Military vessel.
A strategic American asset in the Arabian Sea was attacked by...
More than that, F-18 of the American Army fell down by the American Army themselves, the double shot, because of the missiles of the Houthis drove them crazy and they tried to take them down.
And they hit their own airplanes,
aircraft...
An American aircraft was shot down by an American anti-drone missile, but there were no casualties.
No,
the pilots were able to eject in time.
I want to introduce. We have a problem, and the problem is that the way the world looks at the way Israel defends itself, it seems like we're impenetrable.
Yeah,
and it's wrong. That's not the case. We look at the Iranian past attacks and we say look, we knocked out. There were 500 assets that were launched back in April, whenever that was. And then afterwards, there were another, several hundred, and none of them made it into Israel. And so you would imagine, and I think we fall into that sort of a psychological fallacy, where we think, there's no way that they can stop us. But that's not true. They have learned our systems. And some of the recent Houthi attacks were done, we were talking about this just the other day, where they were done under the protection or the disturbance, I guess, of a swarm of drones, or a bunch of let's call it countermeasures that they're launching at the same time as they're launching the missile. And look, air defense systems are pieces of technology manned by humans.
Definitely.
There's a capacity and a bandwidth, and at a certain point, you or make a mistake or you get overwhelmed. And they've been very clever at doing that.
Yeah, they did. That's why a few drones were able to intercept Tel Aviv, an Israeli city, and cause damage.
Yeah.
And I think that the big
of missiles that Israel got this year, how many missiles we've been shot at?
Do you know?
Do you have it?
Yeah, so look,
what is it?
From Iran we have 200 missiles, ballistic missiles being shot at us.
Okay.
Wait, Tomel, let's give people perspective on the size of a ballistic missile.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's bigger than the studio.
Not this big. It's the size of a bus.
Yeah.
It's the size of a bus flying through the sky at Mach point something, carrying sometimes 300 to 500 or more kilos of explosives. So if this hits a target...
Kilos, it was more than 1,500 pounds or something. I don't know pounds so much.
1 billion pounds.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Very big. Basically, it's a bus. They shoot a bus at us.
We're talking of thousands of pounds of ordnance. Many of them have multiple multiple heads. Sometimes the warhead of a missile can have several that split when they're over the target. Anyway, if this would have hit an Israeli city block, it could have knocked down several buildings. This is the level of destruction that could have caused.
200 of those were fired at Israel.
By Iran.
So Hezbollah
By Iran, directly,
shot more than 3,000 missiles, like heavy missiles at us in the last year. It's here cut it
Wait, now we're going to Hezbollah?
Yeah, I just running over them. Houthis shot at us. Where is that? 21 ballistics until now.
21 ballistic missiles till now. Okay.
That's it?
Hamas, how many rockets Hamas launched at us?
I didn't put Hamas. It's too many.
It's too many, right?
No,
They're still shooting.
Hamas is in the tens of thousands.
Yeah.
It was many thousands on the day of October 7th and
thousands
And
more.
thousands throughout the 10 years, the past 15
No,
years.
but even in the months since October 7th, it was hundreds every night, some of the nights.
Okay. So we finished with Iran. Let's move to number 2.
Since we're on memory lane here, do you remember? So from October 7th through the end of May, was in northern Judea. Northern Judea is about 900,000 meters, which is, I don't know how many feet.
High.
3,500, 4,000 feet high.
Higher than Jerusalem. I think,
Higher
right?
than Jerusalem, yeah. So, and we're looking, so a lot of our outposts were looking west. People forget what the war looked like. Hamas was firing, and this is what they were spending the last years manufacturing. They were firing sometimes hundreds of rockets a night against Israel.
Yeah.
And me and my soldiers, I think many nights, because it was oftentimes the same time exactly every day, 8 p.m. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Rockets night.
Yeah.
Sitting and eating popcorn.
Yeah, we'd go and go watch the show. And because we're high up, but you could see all the way into the Gaza Strip from where we are because of the height difference. And you'd see this volley of rockets come up from the ground. And
then you see the Iron Dome anti-rocket defense system intercept them. It's like a firework show.
And you're both excited, scared, and happy at the same time.
It's weird. It's
all these emotions coming at the same time because we forget what a dramatic year this has been for the state of Israel.
Do you remember before October 7th, the balloon attack, the incendiary balloon attacks from the Gaza Strip? So they basically sent a balloon with helium gas inside of it that was attached to like a firecracker or a Molotov cocktail into Israel, and then it would fall in the agricultural fields and forests and cause damage.
They got more complicated.
And then they started with drones.
No, but even before this, we say balloon, people think, party balloon. No, we're talking like a weather forecasting balloon.
Yeah.
Meteorological balloon. Some of these things are, the circumference that's bigger than this table, and it can carry a payload that's in the kilos, not in the grams.
Yeah.
So multiple pounds of explosive.
Many balloons every day.
Yeah, and they started iterating. So instead of having like a simple one where if it touches down on the ground, it burns into fire, they'd have timing mechanisms on them where it would drop from the sky and set fire to fields and facilities. Again, remember, everything around Gaza is agricultural land on the Israeli side. And so they were trying to cause
everything on the border with Lebanon.
Same.
Basically, on our borders, we have agriculture.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're done with Iran. Let's move to Hezbollah.
So are we done with Iran? What is Iran going to do next year? Let's talk about that.
Well, I think Iran's going to make a run for the nuclear bomb next year. And unless Israel and the United States and the West will stop them militarily, meaning destroying the nuclear facilities, we're going to have a nuclear Iran.
So maybe you know something I don't know, but this is what I've understood so far. Israel and the U.S., without fully invading Iran, don't have the ability to stop the Iranian nuclear program. It doesn't. Tomo, do you know otherwise? No. This is the information that's been released, even with Moab, where it's Moab is acronym for Mother of All Bombs.
But we are always infiltrating Iran. We already infiltrated Iran in the past with spies,
Still, they've diversified their assets when it comes to the nuclear program. They have at this point probably dozens of facilities. Many of them are hidden deep underground. The American government says, the Israeli government says, look, we don't have the ability that from the air to destroy everything. We might cause a lot of damage. Yeah. So they're right now at what is called the threshold. So they're one step away from breaking to a nuclear warhead. And I want to explain that because it's two different technologies.
The Khamenei, I think, said that, or one of the leaders of Iran said that this year gonna be the nuclear year.
Yeah. So let's just explain this. There's several different technologies and capabilities that go into a nuclear bomb. One of them is the process itself of nuclear, is it fission or fission? Whatever. It's
fusion?
No, it's not fusion, it's fission. Anyway, whatever it's called in English, is taking the uranium ore and making it into a warhead. That's one of them. And that itself is not just enriching uranium, which they've been doing. It's enriching uranium to a military grade. Then it's creating the explosive warhead around it that's able to start the chain reaction that's needed to blow it up.
To make an atom bomb.
Yeah. Then you need to do that multiple times, not once. Because you can't have one nuclear bomb, you need to have many nuclear bombs to actually create a deterrence. Then you have to have a delivery mechanism. And the delivery mechanism
ballistic rockets that are capable of carrying a nuclear payload.
Exactly.
All our listeners are going to know how to build a nuclear weapon now.
Who?
Yeah, very, it's more complicated than what we say here, But
yeah. So anyway, so they have many of those pieces. They have the ICBMs. They're not very good ICBMs, but if they had 10 nuclear warheads, they'd be able to deliver some of them into destination.
Yep.
Then it's a question of our defense systems being able to shoot them down. They don't yet have the mechanism of actually blowing up the warhead itself. They haven't built it, but that is something that can be done. It's also something that can be bought off the shelf. And there are countries that have been trying to sell it to them as an off-the-shelf product. The North Koreans have tried several times.
Okay.
Yeah. And Israel's bombed, blown up, or used, let's call it espionage, to kill and blow up the people and the devices,
the infrastructure
that was sent over, that was trying to be sent over to Iran. It's not like they've not been trying. They've been trying nonstop this last year.
No, definitely.
And we've done this also with the Iraqis before them and with Syrians. Before something ever makes it to their country, we've usually blown it up, stolen it, or destroyed it in whatever country's selling them the bomb.
Or on the way.
Yeah.
Or on the way.
Be it the North Koreans for the Iranians,
definitely.
or the French for the Iraqis. You remember this? The Osirak, people forget this. The Osirak nuclear plant in Iraq, they had a nuclear, what is the word in English for this? Reactor core that was built in France. And Israel sent spies into France, this is back in the late 70s? Late 70s, I think. Just so people talk about the good guys and bad guys, let's not forget what they were doing, not that long ago. They were selling nuclear reactors to the Iraqi government under Saddam Hussein, who no one in their right mind would say was a reasonable individual. Anyway, so the Iranians...
Well, they also sold us nuclear reactors, according to foreign press.
Maybe, allegedly.
According to foreign press.
Let's pause for a second before we continue. We were talking about the Iranians. To remind everyone at home, hold on, where's my camera? Pause your video, go to the button underneath the video that says subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, there's a little over half of our views haven't subscribed to this channel. Pause, subscribe, take the little bell so you don't miss the next video. We have videos that come out on a daily basis, both on YouTube and on other social media platforms and on our website. So make sure you go there, you subscribe, and then what do we say? Like and share.
Yeah, like and share. It helps us to reach more people with what is happening in Israel. Helps us, grows our operations in Israel. So please, if you like what we do, subscribe.
So, okay, well, let's carry on. We talked about the Iranians. We finalized the thought with the fact that they're pushing for a nuclear bomb. They will remain a threat, and an existential threat, possibly the only one in the region, for Israel in the year to come, for sure.
Definitely.
And it's something we will continue to fight with directly and indirectly through their proxies.
Definitely.
So let's put them to the side now.
Okay, let's move to the next enemy of Israel, Hezbollah.
Hezbollah.
Okay, where they are located, first of all. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, used to be the largest terrorist organization, the richest terrorist organization, and the most dangerous terrorist organization in the world up until a few months ago, when Israel launched a multiple attack against their leadership, basically terminating Hassan Nasrallah, their biggest leader.
The spiritual and physical leader,
Yeah, and then all the leaders underneath him, all the, even, I would say, lower level leadership, or many of their infrastructure, and push them northern into North Lebanon, while the IDF is still present in South Lebanon. And at the moment, we have a 60-day ceasefire. What's left of it is 30 days. So far, Hezbollah is still engaged in conflicts with Israel on certain locations. They're trying to retrieve their weapons. They're trying to maintain presence and basically test our forces that are present in South Lebanon.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the situation now. Israel was fearing Hezbollah before this war, and I was trained on the fact that when a war will be released between Israel and Hezbollah, they will launch 3,000 rockets every day towards Israeli cities, towards strategic installations within Israel.
And they didn't.
And disturbed the country. And they didn't at that magnitude. They had a few hundreds a day, but not thousands. Thanks, Gitai.
Thank you, Gitai.
What about me? Not nice. Just kidding. No, I went to the bathroom. I'm all watered up. Where is the order button here? I didn't know it was like we're taking orders. Okay. So yeah.
So Hezbollah.
So Hezbollah, yes.
And I think the point you raise is a very important point to be reminded of, is that for decades we thought that Hezbollah were the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
We feared their fighting force. We feared their missile capability. They had upwards of 100,000 rockets aimed at Israel, out of which about half were supposed to be accurate and long range, which means that they had the ability to send rockets and missiles the size that can knock down a building to Haifa, to Ashdod, to Tel Aviv, to Jerusalem in certain cases, and to everything in the range, within that range. So to cause existential damage to the state of Israel, maybe not destroy the state of Israel, but kill tens of thousands of people, civilians in Israel. Yes. That was a threat.
Plus, they planned on invading and conquering the northern part of Israel, the Galilee, and they had commando forces stationed in South Lebanon to do exactly that. Yeah. That was like the second phase of their
that's
operation.
Called, wait a minute, I'm mixing up Hamas and Hezbollah.
Radwan forces.
No, Nukhban Radwan. I was mixing them up in my head. So the Radwan force was a elite force of about 8,000 fighters, out of roughly 80 or 90,000 that the Hezbollah apparently had at the beginning of the war. Yeah. We were expecting, and it's crazy to say this now in retrospect, we were expecting to lose multiple communities in northern Israel the day Hezbollah attacked. That was our expectation.
I know, I remember that.
It's
crazy to think about it now.
Yeah.
Because it was impossible to protect the north with the amount of military that we had before the war started.
So the terrain of northern Israel is very, very dramatic. The topography is very steep. There's a lot of mountains and deep valleys, and very, very hard to deliver supply lines. And on the other side, you had Hezbollah, who were trained. They fought Israel while we were still inside southern Lebanon. They fought against Israel for almost 20 years. They were highly trained. They were highly experienced. Then they were battle-hardened warriors from the
Syrian Civil War.
From the Syrian Civil War, where they massacred Syrian civilians.
And they basically saved the Assad regime.
Yes.
That's another reason why Syria fell now, because they were hit down so hard that they couldn't help Assad, and the rebels took advantage of that situation.
Yes.
And took control of Syria. Okay, so let's do. Okay, physical, mental, and economic ramifications of Hezbollah against Israel in the past year. Okay, so they've been launching rockets, drones that caused severe damage to the northern community of Israel and hurt people, physically and also mentally.
In the beginning of the war, Israel voluntarily, Hezbollah didn't say this and didn't force us, Israel voluntarily initially evacuated over 100,000 people.
From the northern community.
From the northern communities. Entire cities were evacuated in northern Israel, the biggest of which are the northernmost of which is Kiryat Shmona.
Yeah.
We visited there multiple times.
It's like a ghost town.
It was, for the most part.
So you can film zombie movies there now.
I mean, the city was empty. Still empty. You had tumbleweeds rolling across the street, abandoned cars, abandoned houses.
The lights in the streets are like blinking orange, meaning they're like, they're not operating.
Yeah.
It's very sad. And just imagine the amount of money that you need to invest in order to house, feed, teach the kids, the people that were evacuated from these houses.
Do you know what the number is now? What number of people is still evacuated?
No, I don't know. Don't know. Are we like above 50?
I think, Ken, I remember it dropped. We were for most of the war, we were somewhere between 60 and 70,000 people that were evacuated from the northern part of the country.
Just from the north. Yeah.
Just from the north. I know some of the communities have started going back. I haven't checked the last couple of days. We'll hear in a second. So Hezbollah did that. Hezbollah were able to, what's the word I'm looking for?
143,000 תושבים. 140.
No, that was in the beginning of the war.
68,000.
I don't think that's accurate anymore. That's I think 68,000 is the number was the number for months, but we've been up north. We've seen some of the communities go back home.
Yeah.
Since the ceasefire agreement about a month ago. I think the number's smaller today. Maybe there isn't an official one yet. Anyway, but Hezbollah, they did wreak a substantial amount of havoc and damage to northern communities. I remember once sitting up north having lunch, overlooking the Israel Valley, or the Jezreel Valley, as English speakers say.
The Jezreel Valley.
And you just saw like a very substantial amount of rockets just flying over the valley as we're sitting there. You see the intercepts. I'm sitting there eating lunch, looking out of the window. You're like in shock. What is going on? You don't even have time to respond because it's happening so fast. The sirens happen as the rockets are flying through the air. And we just sit there looking. You see the intercepts, and we go back to eating our lunch.
It's weird. It's a weird situation for sure.
The number is 17,600 for now.
17,000? Yeah, so it's dropped. So
17,600. So many of these Israelis decided to move to other communities. Because the north is not packed with people now.
1,000 people starting to go back home now.
62,000. Okay.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot.
Place that stand.
Yeah, so
I saw Instagram and TikTok videos of people coming to their houses and everything is dust. Their houses stand still for a year.
Look, this is going to be on the video we play later this weekend actually, of our visit to Manara. Manara, one of the communities most impacted. I want people to grasp this. These are civilian homes where Hezbollah, for months, and it's a more elaborate story that we talk about in this piece, where they were destroying the community intentionally. They were doing it so there was nothing to come back to.
Yeah.
And this is an innocent village. I'm doing air quotes if you're listening to this. Yeah. An innocent village on the Lebanese side of the border, a Sunni village of 40,000 people that from various locations on this village, they're firing anti-tank missiles again and again and again to blow up and burn every house in the Jewish community of Manara. And when they do so, the people of the community, because it's so dangerous, they can't even come and put out the fires. So the fires burn so hot that they melt the glass, they melt the metal, they melt the cars that are parked outside. We've seen it firsthand.
We saw it.
And they did this, and then the people haven't even been able to visit their homes. We were there
up until a few weeks ago, basically.
We were there when I think one of the first sort of like convoys of civilians came back to see their
to see their houses after more than a year. Yeah, and the annoying part about all of this is that from Manara, the Israeli kibbutz, you see Hezbollah outposts in Lebanon, and in between them you have a United Nations headquarters, like a huge base.
And what we were told, we were on the site is, these guys weren't here for the entirety of the war.
But they came now.
They came now that there's a ceasefire, an Israeli army on the other side of them protecting them. So again, we've learned so many like painful lessons in this war, and I think the biggest one is im enanili mili.
Yeah. If I'm not defending myself, nobody will. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. This is a famous statement from the 1880s or late 1880s in Israeli communities, where people understood no international community is going to give us a country, no international community is going to protect us. We forgot that lesson, and we've been reminded of that lesson this last year.
Definitely.
Where if we don't have boots on the ground, a very good daily show, newscast
I know
on
the
our
host.
YouTube channel.
I know the host.
The host. He's a trustworthy character. It's on our YouTube channel every day. But if we don't have boots on the ground in Syria, in Lebanon, in the Gaza Strip, on the Gaza and Egypt border, on the Egyptian border, yes, on the Egyptian and Jordanian border too, then we will be attacked, we will be compromised.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson we've learned in the last year.
Yep.
The UN won't protect us, no one else will. It's only if we protect ourselves. Yes, we have allies, but we need to protect ourselves first and foremost.
For sure. Okay, so let's summarize the amount of attacks and the frequency of the attacks from Hezbollah against Israel. So only in October, Hezbollah fired 1,158 attacks against Israel, and this includes rockets, UAVs, suicide drones, and this organization increased its firepower and distance and did 296 attacks against Israel at a distance that is higher than 5 kilometers from the border.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is like compared to the previous months. And the primary weapon that Hezbollah used was rocket fire.
Yeah.
And he used that to attack the IDF positions and civilian infrastructure.
Yeah, but they also used countless drones and direct fire from anti-tank missiles. the Israeli army had to fight very hard against Hezbollah.
Yeah.
And there was a very long, let's call it low intensity, low burn conflict that started on October 8th in the north.
Yeah.
And only really changed pace when Israel invaded Lebanon.
I remember the beginning was like a missile from Hezbollah towards us. Then we struck them with a
Artillery
drone
shots
or artillery shot, and then it intensified to two shots. Then it increased into, okay, they shot at a civilian building, then we shot at a Hezbollah outpost near a village or in a village. So and then it became like, yeah, you punch me, I punch you, but a little bit higher, and then it became
escalated.
a completely full-on war. Okay, so what do they have left for 2025? What are they keeping?
Let's be honest here. Hezbollah are much weaker than they were before.
Yeah, that's the best news of this.
It's very,
war,
very,
for sure.
yeah, very, very good news. Hezbollah, as an existential threat to the state of Israel, as they were before October 7th, no longer exist. They've lost.
Hallelujah! Yeah, I think it's very good for us.
Yeah, they've lost their spiritual leader. They've lost their backing. They've lost the ground routes from Iran into Lebanon. That
also the aerial routes.
Yeah. That allowed the Iranians to supply them on a regular basis.
Their banking, the economy was hurt severely, and also their political power within Lebanon. This is the last kind of thing that we're trying to shake up.
And they lost a lot of their fighting power. Yeah. You look at their org chart from before the war, it is all X's.
I know, I remember.
Not a single image left
standing. Shuker, he was so promising.
It took you so long to learn the name. we joke about this, and I realize how many new names we've had to learn in this last war.
Wow.
Again and again and again.
Masoud Pazachtian. Yeah. We need to know.
He still is.
Oh, no, what was before him? Ismail Raisi.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But it's amusing. It's like, it's been such a long war, and so many people have been killed on our enemy side that we're constantly learning new names of enemies. It's not, well, I'd rather we don't have any enemies, but it is
for sure,
amusing to a certain point.
Okay, so what do they have now? They still have rockets?
They still have rockets, but much less.
Plus, it's hard for them to transport them.
They have a political power in Lebanon.
Less.
Less.
And I want to remind people, and we've interviewed several people that are Lebanese in the last couple months. Did they interview with Mariam? Okay,
not yet.
I didn't hear yet. We have a very, very interesting interview coming up, two actually, with people who lived in Lebanon, two women who lived in Lebanon, coming up soon on our YouTube channel. Very interesting testimony. And you remember the Yair before the war broke out, we would see testament to the fact that the Lebanese people were coming against the Hezbollah, and they'd stop the convoys within.
I remember. Like Druze villages or Christian villages that the Hezbollah would try to transport weapons through them, and they would just take over the truck and push away the terrorists.
Yeah, because they had a fuel shortage back then, and anyway, they were rising against. Yeah. Hezbollah has lost a lot of political power in Lebanon. Remember that, what was it, when did the bomb go off in the port of Beirut? What year was that?
Wow, I remember that. That was like a huge explosion.
2020?
I think 2020.
2020? Anyway, several years ago, whatever year it was, I want to say it was like 2020 or 2021, an enormous stockpile of fertilizer. I'm saying this very facetiously. It was explosives, hundreds of tons of explosives that Hezbollah was storing. Think about this for a minute. In the main port, in the most densely populated city in the country, they had possibly thousands of tons of explosives stockpiled, and they exploded. They blew up several city blocks in the city.
It was a container full of balloons for a birthday.
Anyway, and the images of
agricultural materials.
Yeah, it is considered to be the biggest explosion since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's how big it was. You see the images of it.
Yeah,
it is something out of a Hollywood film where someone who's kilometers away, you see the blast wave come their direction and just blow everything in its direction. So that's how strong Hezbollah was in Lebanon. Now the Lebanese people are again fighting them. They're again speaking up against them.
4 August 2020.
Oh, so it was 2020.
They had 200 casualties, like dead people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so Hezbollah is dramatically weakened, and that is a good thing. It's a good thing for us, and it's a very, very good thing for the people of Lebanon. Lebanon has been a country that was ripped to pieces by Hezbollah. Before Hezbollah, there were other external Islamic elements that were pushing the civil war in the country. That country went, and we talk about this extensively in other pieces that we've created. It took a country that was considered to be the French Riviera of the Middle East. Yeah. Lebanon, modern, multicultural, multi-ethnicity, multi-religious country. Beautiful country. They tore it apart in a very long civil war, People think it's about Hezbollah and Israel. No, it's not. They were fighting internally for decades. They tore apart that country. They assassinated their political leaders in the country. So Hezbollah being weakened is good news first and foremost for the people of Lebanon.
For sure.
And my prayer for them, because we'll talk about this at the end, is that they have a better government, that international aid comes in to push out the forces of Hezbollah and allow them some kind of semblance of normalcy in the country.
Yeah, I think there is hope for a democracy within Lebanon, because Lebanon is combined from a bunch of religions, a bunch of ethnic groups.
Yeah.
You have the Druze, you have the Sunnis, you have the Shiites, you have the Christians, and all of them used to have representation in the government.
Yeah.
So there is hope because the political system is built to coexist. So we just need to push out these radicals from Lebanon and the Iranian influence.
Yeah.
And then there is a hope for peace with Israel. And I'm optimistic about it, but only with boots on the ground on the border to defend our people.
Yes.
For sure.
Let's move on. So the following list is, and we started with Iran, moved to Hezbollah. Everyone down the line from the pipeline from this is dramatically weakened compared to what it was previously.
Except the Houthis.
No, the Houthis are weakened too. They're still a fighting force, but they're dramatically weakened compared to what they had previously. Next is Hamas. Hamas was on the eve of October 7th a fighting force with close to 100,000 fighters within it. 100,000, tens of thousands of which were highly trained forces, and the rest were loosely trained militias and terrorists. Yeah. Let's call it more grassroots terrorism. They had a strong stakehold in Judea and Samaria, inside Israel. They were trying to get also to the Arabs of the state of Israel, Israeli Arabs, and they were a substantial fighting force. The IDF invades...
Wait, before that, they also had the largest terror state in the world. They basically converted the Gaza Strip into a terrorist military
playground
base. But every house in Gaza either has an underground tunnel or a shooting position or a rooftop position for a sniper.
Yes.
They prepared the entire Gaza Strip for this war.
Yeah.
For 20 years.
Yeah, and the IDF invaded. When did we invade? End of November.
Yeah, 2 months after.
Yeah, the end of November. We invaded the Gaza Strip. The Hamas, as a fighting force that existed before October 7th, no longer existed.
Yeah, it was built up almost like a military, with brigades,
it was a military
company commanders, with platoon commanders, and now it shrunk into a guerrilla organization with sporadic attacks of individuals that are fighting from humanitarian zones, from schools, from hospitals, and from within the Palestinian people, using civilians as human shields. Well, they did that also in the beginning, but now that's the only thing that's keeping them alive, is hiding behind the children, the women, and the civilians.
And Israel has killed, according to Israeli estimates, close to 20,000 Hamas combatives. I think the number is like 17 or 19,000, according to our tally. According to the Hamas tally, the numbers are made up on a daily basis and should be ignored as they are compulsive.
Sadly, they're not by the international community.
Okay, they should be ignored because they're compulsive liars who lie consistently.
And they have an agenda. And the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza are governed by Hamas.
Yeah.
Meaning Hamas is the Palestinian Health Ministry. That's
let me just say this, because this is the political issue that will tie into, let's call it Hasbara, as we call it, diplomatic efforts. The majority of the people killed in the Gaza Strip by the IDF are young men. This is an important note. In many conflicts around the world, including those fought by the good guys, quote unquote, the majority of the casualties are civilians. And civilians are classified as children and women. In Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, in the last 14 months, the vast majority of the people killed are young men of fighting age. So men between the ages of 16 or 17 and mid-30s. Most of the people killed are in that age group. The IDF has done an amazing job. We could do hour-long conversations about
only
this.
On that, on how to not harm the civilians and the innocent, and we use precision weapons to do that. We call on the population to evacuate before a strike is made. We screen the faces of the people to make sure who's a terrorist and who's not, and many other ways and techniques that were developed in this war. Yeah,
and we've done an amazing job. The lessons learned in this last war are going to be learned for the next 30 years in military schools around the world, on how to fight in densely populated urban areas. the initial estimates, that we had a bunch of American, Afghanistan veterans, generals come in. They were estimating that the IDF would lose tens of thousands of soldiers, and that we would kill hundreds of thousands within the Gaza Strip by just indiscriminate fire. The exact opposite happened. The IDF has lost less than 1,000 soldiers so far, fighting a war in 3 different countries at the same time: Syria, Lebanon, and the Gaza Strip.
It's crazy.
Again, let's not forget Judea and Samaria, where I spent almost 8 months straight at the beginning of the war.
Yeah.
Like we've been fighting a war on multiple fronts. It changes. It's 7 fronts, 8 fronts, depending on what week we're talking about. Done an amazing job of weakening Hamas. Hamas are no longer a fighting force as they were in the past.
Yeah.
And yet the IDF isn't done, because there's still a very powerful militia within the Gaza Strip that is weakening the population and fighting against the IDF.
Well, the issues there are that Hamas is not just a terrorist organization. Hamas is also the governing civil power in the Gaza Strip. So unless you find somebody else to govern the 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, Hamas is still going to be in control.
Yeah.
And plus the ideological aspect of all of this, 20 years of brainwashing the children in Hamas education, in Hamas schools, training them and brainwashing them to hate Israel, to hate the IDF, to hate the Jewish people, is very hard to shift from that hatred to something else.
It's going to take time.
It's going to take a decade minimum with some good leadership and education.
Yes.
And on top of that, they still have 100 Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip. And this is basically kind of their ace up their sleeve that they're using in order to psychologically affect the country of Israel, enormously in the past year.
Yeah.
And they're unwilling to budge from their demands that the IDF will withdraw from the Gaza Strip for any kind of, hostage exchange deal with them.
Yeah,
if you will check Wikipedia, Hamas is winning this war. They're changing Wikipedia rapidly, pro-Palestinians, that in any fight over this war on Wikipedia, it's like million of fights from 7th of October on Wikipedia, Hamas won all of them and Israel lost. So now AIs that going on the internet to search for information always will show that this war, Hamas won.
Well, I'll tell you what they're winning. They're winning the information war.
Yeah.
That's what they've been winning. Hamas and anti-Israelis have been winning, and anti-Zionist and anti-Semitics have been winning the media war throughout this war.
Yeah.
And the reason is not because they are more just. The reason is because they shout louder. And there's a large percentage of people around the world that hate Israel with a passion that can only be attributed to spirituality.
Yeah.
And this was supposed to be at the end of the list, but I'm happy you raised this topic. Hamas used propaganda very successfully, as do the Iranians. They are a villainous and evil organization that stops at nothing, including lying, deceit, and faking reality to shift the public's perception.
Yeah.
And they've been able to push a button that exists in the psyche of people around the world. And again, let's be clear, this is not just Muslims who live in Western countries. There are people on campuses in the US that should be enlightened, that should be educated.
Liberals
who live in an alternative reality.
Ivy League colleges, that's what we're talking about. Like the best of the best that the West can offer are also influenced by these pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism
they're indoctrinated.
slogans.
They are no more informed than let's call it. They're as idiotic as anyone else is around the world. They've been ill-informed and uneducated, and they've allowed a single YouTube video or a lecture that they received in college to shape their worldview without actually going to check the sources.
Yeah, without checking the history, without checking the facts, and without checking who they're supporting and who they are chanting for.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about this so many times, but to think about this, here's a reality. Someone on a US campus who couldn't point out Israel on a map, couldn't point out Hamas on a map, couldn't point out Hezbollah or
which
Iran.
River, which sea.
And they are willing to go on a march on their campuses or outside the campus, call for the extermination of the Jewish people in the land of Israel with knowing nothing about what happens here. And to look at that and to say that this is a logical conclusion, it's a falsehood.
It's diabolical.
You have to look at it from a spiritual lens.
You have to.
And say that the love, Avat Israel, it's the love of Israel is supernatural. The hatred of Israel is supernatural. And if you ignore it, try to explain how a 19-year-old who knows nothing about this country is sure that the source of all evil in the world stems from the state of Israel.
Yeah.
This conflict, even during this war, this conflict is inconsequential in global violence scales.
Worldwide, definitely.
Where were you when Russia invaded Ukraine? Where were you in the countless civil wars that took place in Africa in the last decade? Where were you?
Yeah.
Where were you when the Chinese were massacring whatever minority of the month they were massacring?
North Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, you have evil entities in the world that nobody is speaking about. But then Israel is defending itself.
Where were these people when the North Korean government starved to death between 8 to 14 million people of their own citizens back in the 90s? Where were these people?
Yeah.
Nowhere to be seen or heard of.
No. So, Mati, I think this is a good place to have our conclusion for the the worst enemies of Israel.
Well, let's take 2 minutes for speculation.
Okay.
So here's what I've learned in the last 15 months, is that you could have all the information of in the world, and we'll still have no idea what happens tomorrow.
That's for sure.
That's what we've learned.
That's for sure. Definitely.
That's what we've learned. And 2, that understanding the reality we live in requires attention, complexity, and learning. And I want to encourage people, not because we're the best at that. We try, but there are a lot of good outlets of content out there.
Yeah, for sure.
You really need to diversify your content consumption to understand what's happening in this part of the world and track it on a daily basis. Think that the Houthis were not an enemy we considered a year ago. Hezbollah was the biggest enemy. They're no longer an existential threat for us.
Things change fast.
Things
Hamas was not a threat to Israel, and they caused the most amount of damage to the state of Israel since the War of Independence. So it's unbelievable.
Yeah, so what we know is we don't know. Let's be honest here. And even though me and you on a daily basis and our team, we're all hardworking people, et cetera, and still we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
We can only know that things here move quickly and that the enemies shift on a regular basis. You could find that Turkey go AWOL in the next 12 months, and that Erdogan goes off the extreme edge of reality.
More extreme than what he is now.
More extreme than the alternative reality he already projects to the world, and decides that he's coming to fight Israel. He's done this in the past.
Yeah.
Erdogan, people forget this. When was the flotilla? 2010, 11?
Something like that.
In the 2000s, yeah.
Sometime in the last 20 years.
The Mavi-Marmara flotilla.
Marmara,
Ship from Turkey, filled with weapons, was sent into the Gaza Strip to break the blockade of Israel and then
but just
help Hamas.
To frame the picture for people, we say, we know all the players. Okay, look, the Turkish government, let's say 10, 15 years ago, more than once.
2010, May.
Oh, that was a pure guess, by the way. So 2010, the Turkish government loads up ships, not one ship, ships with violently armed terrorists that are their own terrorists, sends them to the Gaza Strip as a freedom flotilla, while what they're carrying is weaponry to arm Hamas and kill Israelis. And they say, these are peacekeeping people. We expect the Israelis to not bother them. Those people tried to kill, and they do kill, I think, several of the elite Shayetet soldiers that board the ships.
I don't think they killed. They wounded them.
One of them was severely
wounded.
He was stabbed, I think, 100 times or something like that.
Yeah, but these guys are like refrigerators. They take a lot to take down.
Anyway, so again, so the Turkish government could go AWOL. We could find a militia that we never knew about, never heard of, in Iraq that is suddenly launching missiles against Israel and funded by the Iranians. There might be someone in Africa that suddenly decides. This happened, by the way, in the past. That the North Sudanese, we forget about this.
I'm afraid from Turkey.
Okay, look, Turkey has an army.
Yeah.
The Egyptians have an enormous army. What if they become destabilized by whoever knows what, like financial downfall that they suffer? Look, just
very easy. Everything can change very, very rapidly here in the Middle East.
A year and a half ago, people in Egypt were, I'm not exaggerating, they were 30 days away from mass starvation. Not because anything was happening in Egypt, because of Ukraine. You know about this?
Yeah, I know, because most of the grain that Egypt consumed was sent from Ukraine, and now because of the war with Russia, they had to find alternative routes.
Because the Russians were burning the wheat fields of the Ukraine, and they were bombing the ships that were carrying the wheat to the Middle East. Yeah. Wheat prices went up in Egypt, and a country of almost 100 million people was facing mass starvation. Yeah. This is how tricky things here can be. You have more people on the table. What did you just yell at there, Tomer? Jordan.
What, Saudi?
Look,
Jordan is also.
Jordan is a country that is held. I mean, literally, it's an inch away from the government being overthrown any day of the week.
Definitely.
Any day of the week.
Yeah.
They have a population that is anti-government.
I think 60% of Jordan.
We don't know what the real numbers are.
Yeah, we don't have numbers for true, but like a massive amount of populations are refugees. Some Palestinian refugees.
Yeah, and the government in Jordan is not Palestinian.
Yeah.
It is Hashemite, which is Bedouin in its source. They are not supportive of the government. The government fears much of their population. They've had millions of refugees come in from destabilized Iraq, destabilized Syria in recent years. We've filmed
a place for trafficking weapons.
Yeah.
That Iran is sending weapons and drugs. Used to be from Syria, from Iraq, from other places, all the way into Judea and Samaria in Israel.
Yeah.
To help the Palestinian terrorists here against us.
So we really don't know.
This is the situation.
And this is why it's interesting. This is why you have to track the news here on a daily basis to really understand what's happening. Because it's what you have today might not be the case tomorrow, might not be the case the next day.
Okay, so who's last? The least threatening enemy to Israel.
What, Felipe Velope?
No.
The flip-flop
What
wearing
is it? Five? Who's number 5 in the
Houthis.
list? Houthis?
We didn't talk about them yet.
Oh yeah, but we talked about them a little bit in the beginning.
Them.
Yeah. You want to talk about the Houthis
Look,
before we rank?
You wanted to say Judea and Samaria Palestinians?
No.
Houthis.
No, I wanted to say Hamas. Hamas is completely
Hamas.
dismantled. No, but let's list. Let's rank.
Let's rank. Iran is number 1.
No, from the don't destroy the surprise. Plus, I think I have a different number 1, by the way. Okay, let's do from the back end. Okay. Who's number 5th? Who's the weakest?
Right now, today?
Yeah, today.
Hamas.
I agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Hamas is completely a guerrilla organization.
Second, above them, Hezbollah.
Hezbollah, yes. I don't think Hezbollah will last a few years. I think they'll rebrand and become a small thing.
Yeah. Above them,
Houthis?
Houthis, yeah.
Houthis.
Okay. Houthis, aside from like a missile here and there, they don't have the ability to do much more. Not to us, at least.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe to trade, but not to us.
Yeah. Above them, I would say above them, Palestinian terrorism, Islamic Jihad, and terrorism in Judea and Samaria.
Is that number 3 for you?
Yeah, and then I have 2 more.
So I'd say I'll agree with that.
I would say number 2 is Iran.
So who's number 1 for you?
The radical anti-Israel spirit and ideology that we see rising up in the West, in Western colleges, in Western civilization. Because I think that Israel is severely losing that battle, the battle for people's mind. And I think that's what will shape the next decade. And we are winning all these military battles, but we're losing the battle for the young minds and the next generation of this world.
I need to think about this for a second, because what you're saying is, let's say today is the beginning of January 2025.
Yeah.
Existential threats to the state of Israel, not Jewish thought, not Jewish mindset, not Jewish people. Existential threat to the state of Israel. I'd say Iran is on the top of the list.
Existential threat, yes.
Yeah. And possibly above Iran is the unknown. Is the unknown factor and unknown revolution and unknown violent coup that takes place in the Middle East. And instead of ending with HTS and El Julani, it ends with something completely unpredictable, and we have another ISIS on our border. I think that's very, very scary, a scary scenario that could happen.
Easily.
It could happen in Jordan, it could happen in Iraq again. We could see destabilizing forces that are far greater than anything we knew of. And a testament to that is the fact that we live across the fence from Syria. We didn't know they were having a violent coup until it already started. That's how uninformed we are as Israelis.
Yeah, for sure.
Forget about the world, who was completely oblivious to the whole thing. On that, I agree with you that if you look at Israel as an idea and not just as a country, then our existential threat is ideological and not just military.
For sure.
With that, I would agree. Because Israel is not just a country and an army. Israel is an idea that is a culmination of biblical prophecy, God's provision and protection for his people, and the worldview of Judeo-Christian values. And if you look at it from that perspective, then yes, I would agree with you that our enemies are not the Iranian people. It's the anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, anti-biblical narrative that is the same in Iran, the same in campuses across the U.S. that call for destruction of the people of Israel.
Same
the
in
same
Europe.
in Islamic violent attacks against Jewish communities in Europe, where the West, and think about what happened in the Netherlands the other week, where Western countries look at the violence within their own population and have no idea how to talk about it, how to address it physically. Like they're
Yesterday, there was a suicide
ramming attack.
Ramming
attack in the United States. Yeah.
On Bourbon Street.
Yeah. Attacking Israeli nationals, right?
Yeah, two
Israeli nationals were hurt.
And 15 other people.
Look, let me say this. I want to end on a hopeful note.
Yeah, for sure.
What we've seen this past year is one, our audience dramatically grow. And it dramatically grew not because we're the best. We try hard, but there are a lot of good outlets out there.
Because people want to know what's happening here.
Because people wanted to hear the truth about what's happening in Israel. And our response, both in person and online, has been one: love and support. Across the board, we've encountered this. We're talking hundreds of millions of views at this point in the year. I don't know what the number is. It's tens of millions a month. So let's say it's hundreds of millions of people have viewed our content throughout the year and said, we love, we support, we care for the people of Israel.
We pray for the people of Israel. We pray for the situation.
And I want to end on that as I don't think it's all negative. I think as much as evil has risen around the world, people that were on the fence as far as their affiliation can no longer afford to do that anymore because it's become apparent that evil is evil, and that if you want to stand up for good, you have to stand up for the good.
I don't know even how to read this number.
No, it became
168,200,679 million views this year.
So almost 170 million views. That's not a bad number.
Definitely.
You know.
No, definitely. I think that I'm really encouraged in this past year that bad is bad, good is good, and many people really, stepped up to defend Israel, to pray for Israel, to pray for the good, and to stand against the evil that we're fighting here in this situation.
And I'd say I feel hopeful because I think so we have several ceasefire agreements, and then the Trump administration being sworn in, when is it, on the
20th of January.
So on the 20th, the Trump administration is being sworn in. That can be a incredibly positive event for us. One, he moves fast.
Yeah.
Two, it can force a different conversation within the Arab world in our region, where forces will unite against the Iranian influence in this region. And as much as we look at the negative, we spent over an hour talking about the negative in this region, there's a powerful force in the positive sense of it, that is Saudi-led, that is Emirati, that is several other countries in this region that want peace and stability.
Yeah.
And wait, they also have the pockets and the military to promote that. They are willing to go to war. And let's not forget this. Saudis are willing to go on bombing missions together with American and Israeli aircraft if it means that it weakens our Iranian enemies.
Yeah,
okay, so there isn't a completely different scenario where
instead
of being a negative war,
a coalition of anti-Iranian influence in this region. And Israel is part of that, and Saudi Arabia is part of that.
Yeah.
So that's really encouraging.
That might be that this is the turning point of a year. That this year turns everything around in this region, and people say, enough of radical Islam, enough of the violence, enough mincing words with talking about the evil that is the evil of our time.
Yeah.
Let's take a strong stance against it. These are countries that have money, they have air forces, they have military, they have naval forces. They have the ability to make a difference. And together with a very bold and strong and unpredictable Trump administration, that could be an incredible future for the state of Israel and its interest in this region.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Mati, I wish you a great 2025. To you, Tomer.
To you, Tomer, and everyone else.
All of you. Thanks for standing with us. Please like, share, subscribe, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Amen to that. Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org.